Hello, and welcome everybody to a live episode of Pod Strickland. I'm your host, Shwin. Not joined today by Stacy. Got a busy week, so I'm going solo, and that is going to be our show today. Before we do that, do have to make a few announcements. First, being that Strickland has a YouTube channel where, if you're currently watching, you should be subscribed. Please hit like, subscribe to the channel, leave us a comment. That'd be a huge help to us. The Strickland also has merchandise, which you can find on our website, www.thestrict.land. There's a link that'll take you to the merchandise store. There's all kinds of cool stuff that you can find on there, like t-shirts, sweatshirts, hats, coffee mugs, water bottles. You name it, we've got it. The Strickland also has a Patreon, which you can subscribe to. There are a number of different tiers. There's a $6 tier that gets you access to Pod Strickland, the podcast that I host every Friday with Prez. You also get access to Take Some Obvious Bozos, a podcast hosted by Andrew Steele, a.k.a. Doug, along with Zach Blatter, and you get access to the Strickland Discord, where the conversation never stops. There for the tiers, there's a $9 tier that gets you access to Strick and Roll, my solo pod, I rant and rave about things more. You also get access to wonderful premium articles by Matthew Murdo, one of the best in the business, and you get access to Strictly NFL, which you guessed is a podcast hosted by Constantine Mechikos and Desmond Novak. There are further tiers. There's a $15 tier, $30 tier, $50 tier, and a $100 tier. It's got a variety of additional benefits, like listening on a pod recordings, merchandise discounts, and even potentially co-host a podcast alongside yours. Truly one day, whether you choose to subscribe or not, none of this would be possible without you. And none of this would be possible without BetOnline. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform, your number one source for online betting. From the earliest odds, in-game live betting, BetOnline provides you with all the action and the ability to watch games as they happen with a large selection of odds on everything from football, NBA, NHL, to entertainment and political props. Head to BetOnline today to get in on the action with America's most trusted site for online wagering. BetOnline, the game starts here. So the Knicks are coming off of probably their best win of the season. They completely just beat the brakes off of the Grizzlies, 143-106. They scored 83 in the second half, 42 in the third quarter, 41 in the fourth. Just a totally dominant victory. And while it 100%, look, you're not going to have games like that often. In the sense of, not only did the Knicks execute at a high level, but obviously they shot a really high percentage from the field, and it just felt like this is not to take away anything from the Knicks, because they took that game, they dominated the game, they were in control of that game, but Memphis played poorly. So, 143-106. It is what it is. Like you enjoy those games. But I think the main thing for me to take away from it is your shot making might not be there every night. Obviously not at that level, right? Your kind of flow and connectivity offensively may not be there at that level every night. But and you're not going to get, whatever it was, 26 deals or what the hell they had in that game. Like you're not going to get that every night. But you look back at the last 4 games they've played, right? So you have the game against the Hawks. They win that 119-110. They win an ugly game against Brooklyn, 99-95. Then they, beat down the Kings. I forget that score, but, they totally destroyed the Kings in that game. 143-120. And then obviously you get this 143-106 total beatdown of the Grizzlies. And I think the main thing for me, or at least what I've taken away from these games, is you are starting to get and see and feel a better baseline level defensively. And, it's important to remember, like we saw, in December, they had a really nice month, right? And, they go on a run and it's all great, win 9 in a row. And it felt like, okay, now we figured it out. And then obviously they have a little blip right around the start of the new year. But this feels different. This feels a little, not just a little, it feels better because, one, the quality of these victories, you're playing some good teams and you're beating them. You absolutely destroyed Memphis. So again, they're 31-16. right? They have the same record as the Knicks. This is one of the best teams in basketball, and the Knicks totally dominated them. They outclassed them, right? We talked about after the Knicks got blown out by OKC. That was a game where they outclassed us. This felt in a similar ballpark in terms of you just saw it just felt like two teams playing at totally different levels, right? And it's important. Look, it's important to remember regular seasons are long. You have one-off games like this. Does this mean the Knicks are in a totally different class to Memphis overall? I don't know. The broad metrics and all that stuff would tell you these are similar teams. But when you play a team in your weight class and you beat them down the way the Knicks did, I mean, that says a lot, and the Knicks have been lacking. They lacked, a signature win, so to speak. So getting this win was pretty big for them. Just for, comparison's sake, Memphis has a plus 7.4 net rating. That's actually fourth best in the league this year. The Knicks are at plus 7.1, so they're fifth, right behind Memphis. Memphis has the fifth best offense in the league with a 118.0 offensive rating, and they actually have the sixth best defense in the league, 110.6 defensive rating. So for the Knicks to really dominate that game the way they did, it's special, and it's special in the sense of, like, I'm not calling it, this is not going to live on as you hope to have bigger wins than this, right? Because you're hoping to win a championship. But games like this you shouldn't take them for granted as fans. You should really appreciate when a team plays at the level the Knicks did and dominates a quality opponent the way they did. I mean, they put up 136.9 offensive rating in this game. Again, this is against the sixth best defense in the league, at least by defensive rating. And they held Memphis. Memphis had 101.5 offensive rating in this game. Just so, like, people have a point of comparison. Oklahoma City's leading the league with defensive rating at 104.8. So the Knicks really, really just controlled Memphis. And yeah, of course, Memphis throwing the ball all over the court and out of bounds and whatever helped the cause. But the Knicks, they put pressure on them. Like, and that, I think, is really why this feels different, this little run they've been on. Mikal Bridges is playing the best defensive ball of his season right now. He's really making it difficult at the point of attack. He is not dying on screens. He is fighting over. And then you saw some of the plays he made on John Morant where he's just, he stuffed him, right? I mean, he was in Morant's face. Morant had a tough night. He had a horrible night. And I know Morant's been struggling a little bit recently, but, speedy point guards, these are kind of the matchups that in general have given the Knicks trouble, and at times Mikal Bridges too, specifically. So for him to control the game that way defensively and really not give Ja any room to breathe was pretty special. And then obviously, Josh Hart you always are going to have to accept that there's going to be some wild gambles and some ill discipline at times from him as a help defender, off-ball defender. But it's been better in this recent stretch for sure. And then the fact that he, obviously can help you control the defensive glass. I think he just has a knack for making big plays in moments defensively as well. And, obviously we know all the rebounding and the offensive stuff that he's providing, but defensively, I think he has a knack for making big swing plays. And he's in a good vein of form right now. So that's good to see. And then OG, look, this guy really struggled for a good amount of time. And offensively, that never concerned me that much because his track record is it's established, right? We know kind of what he's going to do over the course of an 82-game season offensively, right? 16, 17 points per game, 37, 38% from three, really good finisher, all that stuff, cutting. We know what he provides offensively. But defensively, I think in the last, like not in the last, but probably what I would say from like end of December into this last week, he had really struggled. I mean, there was that game against the Pistons where I thought it was his worst game as a Knick. Definitely on the defensive end, he just completely got fried by Cade Cunningham, was dying on screens. He was making really sloppy execution errors. He was gambling too much in ways that would never result in impacting the actual play at times. Like he, just helping off of his man onto like the post, right? Unnecessarily. And then it's just an easy three. Or, like again, to go back to that Pistons game specifically, where it's like, hey, why is Ron Holland just getting a straight line drive on you from a standstill? Like, why is that ever happening? So to see the way he's now played, I think, again, these last four games, you talk about the Knicks kind of playing at a better level defensively. I don't think it's a coincidence that in those four games, it feels like OG has really come back to his best form as far as his defensive play. I thought he was really good in that Hawks game defensively. I thought in the Nets game, look, he couldn't buy a bucket. Nobody could on the Knicks, but I thought defensively he was spectacular in that game. And then these last couple of games, the Kings and then obviously Monday night against the Grizzlies, he was a force, just a wrecking ball. And with Mikal defending the way he is at the point of attack, I think it allows OG to really focus in and hone in on the things that make him special. And it accentuates what he does, right? Because your defense isn't in rotation constantly, and you're not having endless breakdowns at the point of attack, which compromises everything. So because of that, OG's help now is kind of, it can be called upon appropriately, I guess is maybe the best way to put it. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm just very, very happy to see Mikal and OG defend this way together. Because again, going back to that December where the Knicks go on a nice run, win 9 in a row, and the defense was trending up, 100% it was good, but it never felt like this. It never felt like those two were necessarily at their best defensively anyways at the same time. And these last few games, I think you're seeing that. And I know it's weird to include that Kings game because they put up 120, but I would say that had very little to do with Mikal and OG. And the Kings they're an explosive offense, so it's going to happen to you sometimes. But yeah, I mean, I'm just really, really excited to see how they're playing together right now. It feels good, and it looks good, obviously. And then also just like small things, like I think, if you go back, that Pistons game again, but that was a game where they had a lot of defensive breakdowns. It felt like Tibbs took way too long to adjust to things. And it was really concerning because you're like, they were in a little bit of a rut there. And you're wondering, like, all right, when are they going to consistently execute? Why does it look like they're so lost at times defensively? And not just as an individual, on an individual level, but collectively, it just felt like there were so many moments where you're like, why does it look like they don't know what they're supposed to be doing as a group? And in these last four games, they seem a lot more obviously connected, but they also seem to be understanding what they need to do. And I think Tibbs is doing more to kind of help the team in a lot of ways. And I'm not going to, I know a lot of the focus was the minutes and how he was managing rotations and how that's improved. And I do think it's improved, but I think beyond that, they're switching a lot more. They're switching more cleanly. So I'm not sure what was the issue previously, but they're definitely switching more cleanly. I think he's mixing in a better variety of coverages involving Cat where it's not just drop. Although that Kings game was very brutal in that sense. Malik Monk killed us because he had Cat playing drop so much. But that doesn't seem to be as frequent now. And then look, I think it needs to be said, I think Precious has been really good over this last run. I mean, that Kings game, obviously, Hart, Mikal, OG, those guys were fantastic in that game. And I think they were the driving factors behind the win. But I thought Precious was great in that game. And you could feel the difference defensively when Cat was in versus him. And I think he's having Precious switch more. I think Precious is, he even talked about it after this past game against Memphis that he feels like he's in a better place now after, he obviously had the hamstring to start the season. And, he had to work his way back from that. And he looks sharper. He looks more athletic. I mean, you see some of his kind of, he is a pretty incredible athlete, and you saw that in transition against Memphis on a few occasions. I feel like he's affecting shots around the rim more. He's had some really spectacular blocks, and he's not fouling, right? He's not getting into foul trouble, which is a big deal. I mean, that's huge for him. So, yeah, I mean, he had 4 steals and 2 blocks against Memphis in that game. He just had a really, really nice game. And I think it's significant because he gives you the ability, obviously he can back up Cat, but he also gives you the ability to play with Cat. And that is a good kind of change up for the Knicks to play big, right? Have 2 bigs on the floor. But yeah, I just think that he's been playing at a really solid level. So this year, he's actually posting right now. He's only averaging 3.8 fouls per 100 possessions. That would actually be a career low for him. So speaks to him being more disciplined on that end. And don't look now, but just going to throw this out there. Precious Achiuwa, highest effective field goal percentage of his career so far this season at 57.2. Highest true shooting percentage of his career so far this season at 57.4. So he's playing really solid ball for the Knicks. And I don't think you could ask for much more than what he is giving you right now. Honestly, what he's giving you right now is kind of what you probably hoped would be the upside of what he can give. So he's playing great. Deuce had a nice game against Memphis. He has struggled a little bit for a while. So good to see him kind of get off, or at least hopefully start to get out of his slump. Monster dunk, obviously. That was nice to see as well. Campaign is playing as well as you can. He's a little crazy for me at times. Some of his shot selection is for sure, let's say, confident, to say the least. But you can't complain with what he's giving you on a veteran minimum, right? He is, again, he's giving 55.2 effective field goal percentage. He's shooting 42.8% from the field and 40% from 3. He's giving you 7.4 points, 2.5 steals, under 1 turnover a game, 0.7 turnovers per game, and he's only playing 14.6 minutes, so just under 15 minutes per game, and he's giving you good ball. And again, another guy, 57.6 for shooting. You'll take that, obviously. 55.2 effective field goal percentage. That's his best since the 2020-2021 season with Phoenix. So you're getting that on a veteran minimum. You can't complain about that. And then Landry Shamet has had some decent performances here. It's nice to see him hit some threes like he did against the Kings the other night. He had 3 in that game. And I just think that he's probably feeling a little bit more confident, obviously coming back from that shoulder. That was a thing. But he's at least giving you some minutes here. And whatever he gives you just allows you to rest Mikal a little bit more, rest OG a little bit more, not play Josh Hart as much, and that matters. Like you're getting that trust, at least from Tibbs, to trust him to a certain extent, enough to buy those guys minutes. And because of that, now you're not seeing these crazy, like Mikal playing the first 15 minutes of the first half or whatever it was. He's getting subbed out earlier in first quarters, right? He's getting more rest. And I think that you're seeing some of the dividends of that paying off. And I know that there's criticism fairly in some ways that, Tibbs should have been doing this earlier. Would have been nice. I don't know what necessarily was the reasoning for that. Was it his lack of trust in guys like Campaign and Lander Shamet, whatever? Yeah, possibly. But it also could be like they just weren't playing particularly well, or not well as far as he viewed it. And they needed time to get up to speed. In particular, Shamet, right? Campaign's been healthy the entire season, and he said he's just a streaky player. I think Tibbs understands that, so he's kind of careful about maybe riding the hot streaks and then trying to balance it out when he feels like Payne's maybe going a little too crazy. But with Shamet, I think he just needed time to build his game rhythm up, and it seems to be improving here over this past stretch of games. So because of that, now you're getting the ability to sit Mikal more and whatever. And he's not even playing that much, right? Like he played 9:53 against the Hawks. He played 6 minutes against Brooklyn. He played 12:45 against the Kings. He played 11:41 against Memphis. But just being able to give him those minutes and trust him to be effective enough in those minutes, I mean, that helps a lot. And again, good to see him last two games. Again, 3 of 5 from 3 against Sacramento, 2 of 4 against Memphis. So, he's only at 31% for the season. He hasn't shot that many, to be clear. But if he can just get up to his career averages, that will be a boost for a Knicks bench that we know has not been super potent in terms of scoring. Although, again, Campaign, Deuce McBride, Precious all in double digits in that Memphis game. So hopefully they're catching a rhythm now as a group, and Tibbs is hopefully trusting them more. So we'll see how that develops. But yeah, it's just good. It's good to see that for sure. And yeah, I mean, I haven't even talked about Cat or Brunson, and I don't think I need to, because we know what those guys are giving us. They're deserved all-star starters. Brunson has been on a nice run. He is trusting his 3-ball again, which is nice to see. I still think he can shoot more. Like, I still would like him to take more threes. Over his last 5 games, he's 4 of 6, 4 of 6, 1 of 4, 3 of 5, 3 of 7. And even with that, like, I want him to take more, and I think he can take more. I think he should take more. But he is shooting well from 3. He's at 40.3% from 3 now for the season on 5.9 attempts per game. Again, would like to see those attempts go up a little bit, but very, very good nonetheless. This is the second best effective field goal percentage he's posted in his career, and by far the best since he's come to New York. But yeah, I mean, he's back to playing metronomic ball is probably the best way I could put it. He is playing with a rhythm and a consistency that I think he was. It just felt like the entire year he was really searching for it. And there's still moments in games like that Brooklyn game, which was really bad until the end for him, where it's not maybe as clean as we are accustomed to in terms of the consistency of his decision making. It's not just the output, right? We know, like, we can all look at the numbers and be like, what are you guys talking about? He's playing great ball. And I'm not denying that. Like I said, he deserves to be an all-star starter. There's no question about it to me. But the consistency of his approach, the consistency of his decision making, I think has been a lot more variable this year. But lately, it just feels like it's getting back to a very clean understanding of what he needs to do, what he should be doing, what are good shots for him, what are his spots, when should he get to those spots. And then also, obviously, playmaking for their guys. He's having the best playmaking season of his career, 10.4 assists per 100 possessions. His next high was last season at 9.6. And last year, one of the reasons he had like his best playmaking season last year was that he had the ball so much because of all the injuries and him having to carry the burden in a way that he doesn't have to do this year and that he's not doing this year. His usage is down. It was at 32.5 last year. It's at 29.2 this season. It's you're not asking him to do as much. And I think for him, and this is just my interpretation, I haven't heard him say anything along these lines, but like, I think for him, sometimes when your decision making is simple, like he didn't have to make, like it was very easy last year, especially after guys get injured, to go into games being like, well, I have to do all of this shit. So I know that going in, and there's kind of no worries about getting other guys going and balancing everything out. Like, because he was the one guy that could create offense after a certain point. When Randall goes down, obviously OG missed a bunch of time. We don't need to relive the injuries again. We know what happened. This year, he has a more complex set of decisions on a possession-to-possession basis, right? Because Mikal, obviously, look, this is a guy that did average 20 points per game in Brooklyn. He's got OG, who I think it's fair to say a player who at various points in his career has wanted to be more involved offensively. He's obviously got Cat, who, I mean, Karl-Anthony Towns is having a spectacular season offensively, right? He's averaging 24.9 points, 54% from the field, 43.2% from three. Like he's playing spectacular ball, but he's got to make sure all of these guys feel involved and not just feel involved, but he's also got to help get them into rhythm and set them up and be that table setter, while also like understanding Brunson himself is wired to be a scorer, right? So it's a more complex set of decisions he has to face on a possession-to-possession basis. And I think he did struggle with all of that at various points. And it wasn't like struggle is a very relative term here, right? He's obviously having a phenomenal season, but we could feel it. I think we've all felt that at various points this season as fans, where you're like, why does it feel like he's struggling and why does it feel like he'll have 35 and then the next game he'll have like 16? Like, where is that? What's happening? I think a lot of that has to do with he wants to be a good teammate, right? He understands that this is a more talented team than he's ever played on. And part of his duties now as a point guard, it's not like it was last year. It's not just, hey, we need you to average 38 and 7 or whatever, right? It's different what you're asking from him. And it's a little bit trickier to find that balance. But I do think he's getting there right now. Just getting to a few comments here. Omar Yusuf, by the way, Shwin, AD out at least 1 week, which means AD will miss Saturday's matchup against the Knicks. Yes, he will. I watched a lot of that game yesterday that the Lakers played against the Sixers. Without him, I got to say their defense is really atrocious without AD. I mean, they're just bad on both ends without him. LeBron is LeBron, and it's a one-off game, right? So anything can happen. But yeah, I mean, AD not playing is a pretty big deal. The Knicks should be winning that game, and they should be winning it fairly comfortably. JK says Brunson will never shoot as much as his shooting talent allows him to. Too wired for bully ball. Not a bad thing, but it is what it is. I agree. I mean, I think this is the thing that is like, if there is a gripe I have with his decision making this year, the biggest gripe I would have, it is that it feels like there are times where he has the opportunity to take a pull-up three or whatever, and he doesn't, because he eschews that to go drive inside and get to his floater, get to the rim, whatever it is. That's just how he is wired. And I do think that it's just part of who he is, and we have to accept that and take it for what it is. Look, if that's his biggest issue, I'm not that concerned about it, given his efficiency and volume as a scorer, which has maintained and gotten better and whatever over his time in New York. So I'm never that worried about Brunson's offense. I'm always sure that it will come around. I do want to talk about one thing that not one thing, but a broad thing. So Jimmy Butler obviously requested or not requested. He's been suspended indefinitely. He requested a trade at one point. Then like there was a whole thing about he didn't actually request a trade, but he would be okay with being traded. Whatever it is, we know he wants out. He wants a new contract. Miami's not going to give him a contract, so therefore he wants out. We get all that. But what I think is interesting as it pertains to the Knicks is such an important part of being a good GM, president of basketball operations, lead executive, however you want to put it, is knowing your team, knowing your guys, and getting ahead of things. Like, obviously, the nature of the NBA is you can't plan and predict for everything that comes up over the course of a season or whatever. So at times you are going to have to react in the moment to things that occur. But I think getting ahead of potential tricky situations as far as how players will react and things like that is a big part of it. And for Miami to hang on to Butler going into the season, knowing, right, this is a player who we know has in the past ruffled feathers, right? We know how he left Minnesota, right? He didn't get a contract and he was unhappy, and then because Wiggins got a max, and so therefore he just started having a hissy fit and being a shitty teammate and making things so uncomfortable that Minnesota had to trade him. So they traded him to Philly, whatever. So that this is when he doesn't feel appreciated, when he thinks, hey, I deserve a contract, but you haven't given me one, how this can play out. And I don't know what, none of us do. We don't know what conversations they had over the summer with other teams regarding Butler. We don't know what they were offered, if they were offered anything. So I can't say that they, I don't know. Again, I don't know, but they didn't get ahead of the situation, and now they're dealing with it in real time right now, in the middle of the season. And the reason why I think that's interesting is we know, obviously, the Knicks had a big need at center after Hartenstein left because Mitchell Robinson was injured. We already knew that at the time. And, as much as they'll message that we really like Precious, we really like Jericho Sims, I don't think anybody wanted to see those guys be the only centers on the roster for extended duty. And sure, we can talk ourselves about, hey, or maybe Randall will play the 5 and that'll be an interesting look and whatever. So we know the Knicks had this need at center, but I also think part of the reason that, and not part of the reason they traded for Cat necessarily, but part of the reason they never seem to get anywhere with Randall on extension talks, and I think part of their motivation in doing the Cat trade in a way was to move on from Randall, who I think it would have been a bad situation in New York if he had stayed. Not because he's not going to be Jimmy Butler, I don't think, but in terms of his, how kind of problematic he could be, but it would have been an uncomfortable situation because he would have been playing for a contract, which he is right now in Minnesota. I think he probably would have felt like he was, oddly enough, an outsider in the group. Hey, OG got a contract, Brunson got his extension, McCall's, he's not extension eligible, or he is extension eligible yet, but financially it doesn't make sense for him to get one, but you anticipate him getting one. Why are all these other key components on this team getting contracts or have contracts? And how come I'm having to play this out? And I think that could have just gotten into a really messy place. So, I think the Knicks and Leon Rose specifically deserve credit for getting ahead of that situation so that it didn't go into the season. And look, we know they made the Cat trade right before the start of the season, right? I don't think they wanted to bring that into training camp. I think they understood that could potentially be a awkward situation, and that was not something they wanted to deal with and risk it derailing what obviously they hope to be a very, very competitive, high-level season for this team. They view themselves as a contender. You don't want anything derailing that. Obviously, again, the primary motivation of the trade is to get Cat, right? We know that. But I do think that Randall situation was one that they were not keen to deal with coming in. And we know, I mean, there were reports that the Knicks had shopped Randall. They talked to multiple teams about him. Those talks obviously did not get anywhere substantive, but we know that happened. So I don't think it was just like, hey, he has to go because this is how we can make the numbers work for Cat. I do feel like it kind of killed two birds with one stone for them because they didn't want to extend Randall. And I understand why you don't want to, right? Because, we know his well-documented playoff struggles. He doesn't get a chance to disprove that last season because of the injury. Do you want to commit money to that long-term? And not just money, right? Like, I think there's a number the Knicks would have extended him. But to me, that number was always going to be well below what Randall himself would want and accept in New York. And, once you give OG Anunoby 5 years, 200 whatever the hell it was, 212 million, and Brunson gets 156 and whatever, like that kind of sets the bar, at least as far, in my opinion. If I was Randall, I'd be like, all right, well, he would obviously view himself as equivalent to Brunson in terms of importance and level to the team. And he 100% would be like, oh, I'm better than OG. I'm a better player than OG. So I at least should be getting that amount, if not, probably more. And that's, the Knicks were just they're not going to give you, they were never going to do like a $45 million a year per year deal for Julius. It's never going to happen. And that's why, every report was that they had never really gotten anywhere serious with extension conversations. And that's because I think Leon knows that. I think he knows, hey, if the contract I might give Julius is one that would not help anything and would probably insult him. Right or wrong. And I think it's easy for all of us to be like, well, how could you be insulted? That's kind of it is what it is. Where's your market? Who else is going to give you that money? And I think that's fair and that's probably accurate, but that's a really tough conversation to have with Julius. And it's probably not one that he's going to respond to well. And at that point, it's like, well, if we're not going to give him the money that he's probably looking for in this deal, on his next deal, and we don't want to necessarily play this out, because playing it out for the year, one, it's a very awkward situation because he's playing for an extension. How does that manifest on the floor, on the court, and all that stuff is its own consideration. But he has this player option for next season. And if you don't feel comfortable giving him the money that he wants on an extension, but you also feel like you're not sure that market for the number he wants even exists elsewhere, what team is actually going to give him that type of money, guess what? He might end up picking up the option, and then you have to do the whole thing again, this awkward situation next season. And that was a concern I had brought up in the summer, right? It's not just that, well, he's an expiring contract. It's like, well, he's an expiring contract, but he also might not be, depending on what his market is. And I think this is something that Minnesota is going to have to deal with, because in my opinion, I think he's picking up the option. Julius is a really talented player. He's a really good player. We all know Julius very, very well as far as what he can provide and what he does for a team. But like, he's always been a tricky fit. He is Julius is not a walk in the park, right? He is not smooth sailing. Everything is easy going personality with him. He's not an asshole. Like, he's not like this horrible teammate, obviously, but he's not an easy teammate. And that is stuff that, I mean, we all experienced that as Knicks fans, obviously, through his time in New York. But that's something that obviously NBA teams are going to be aware of and are aware of. And, how does that affect what his market is in the offseason when he's looking for an extension? I don't know. I can't speak to that. I don't know for sure. But I think it definitely deflates his value to other teams, along with being a tricky fit. Like, he's a 4 who definitely cannot play the 5 because he's just a bad defensive player. And that will be exacerbated when he plays the 5. So he's a pure 4 in that sense. He is not the best shooter, right? He's not like this fluid floor spacing threat. He can get very wild with the ball, right? His decision making at times can be very, very up and down, as well as his temperament. And all of that means there's probably not a rich market for him in suitors. I mean, I think the Knicks had been, I don't want to say shopping him for a long time, but I think they've been listening on calls and were never opposed to trading him for a long time. It had to be for the right piece. It had to be in a way that made sense, that returned value. And those deals took forever. And if you ultimately look at it, how did Randall get traded, right? He gets traded as kind of like a soft expiring in the deal that helped make the money work. And all of the messaging from Minnesota after the trade was about Dante DiVincenzo, his skill set, his contract, how much value they put on getting him in the trade. And then, we got this first round pick too, and it could be like a pretty decent pick and whatever. And it might end up being a pretty decent pick because it's going to probably fucking convey this year because the Pistons are having a really nice season. Congratulations to them. So they're going to get a decent pick out of it, I guess. But like, Randall was the kind of throw-in in the trade. He was not the primary piece or the secondary piece. He was the piece that helped make the numbers work. And that tells you something about what his market ultimately was and is, and his value around the league. And that's why I think there's a pretty decent chance he picks up his option, be it in Minnesota or if he gets included in a trade elsewhere. How many teams do you feel confident saying, like, yeah, that team would definitely like to give Julius a 3 or 4 year contract extension, right? You tell me. I don't know how many teams are signing up to have Julius Randle on the roster at probably the price point he's looking for, right? Like $40 million, let's say, per year into his mid-30s. How many teams do you feel confident are willing to sign up for that? I don't know if there's any. I don't think there's any. And I actually think his market is going to be pretty deflated. Like, I'll put it this way. Obi Toppin got 4 years, $60 million, I believe. It would not surprise me if that is ultimately the type of offers that would be out there for Julius. And that's, like, again, he's just a tricky player because is he worth more than that? Yeah, he's better than Obi Toppin, no question. But he's not the easiest fit, and he's not an easygoing, lovey-dovey guy all the time, right? He can be very volatile. So how many teams want to sign up for that, and how much value they put on that? I don't think his market's going to be, I think that he's going to get a lay of the land. I'm sure his agent will help him get a lay of the land of what is out there for him. And at the end of it, again, whether he's in Minnesota or elsewhere, I would fully expect him to pick up that player option for next year. It's like a $30.9 million player option. I think that'll be a lot better than what he has available to him this offseason as far as contract offers. Getting to a few more comments here. Chris Bernhard, Pat Riley's no-nonsense stuff worked for 4 years, but just like everything does, times change and things end. Does this happen if they get Harden, Dame, someone else earlier? Who's to say? I mean, Riley has not exactly been very aggressive about acquiring talent in these last couple of years. And that, too, is part of Jimmy Butler's frustration. But, like, do we think that Butler cares about any of that stuff if they just give him the max extension that he wants? Right? It's like whatever it is, like a 2-year, $123 million extension to what his contract is now. Do we think if they had offered him that he would have been like, well, I don't know, you guys haven't really made moves to be competitive? No, I think he'd have been fine. He'd taken it and been, he'd be playing on the court and not being a kind of prickly asshole. So that's what I think. I actually have some sympathy for Riley in this situation, in the sense of, like, I wouldn't extend Butler either. It's like, hey, man, you're getting older. You do miss a lot of time consistently every year. And then you're running your mouth about, like, random shit. I wouldn't have extended him. And so I get that part of it, but you have to get out ahead of it, right? Like Leon did. And he didn't. He let it kind of fester into the season, trusted the vaunted Heat culture and Eric Spoelstra and these guys to get everything, make everything okay and get everybody on the same page. And it just hasn't worked out that way. Which was it's not that surprising. You know what I mean? Like, it really is not that surprising that Jimmy Butler is throwing a hissy fit. It's probably one of the most predictable things anybody could have talked about coming into the season, given, again, that he wasn't extended. So, I mean, good for us and fuck Miami. But, yeah, I do understand why he wasn't extended, but at the same time, you got to understand how that might play out with Jimmy. And it's playing out exactly like I think a lot of people would have expected it to. Pliny the Welder says, I think it's pretty clear Brunson hasn't actually even come close to what his peak with this team will be. It's extremely encouraging to think that he can definitely still be better. I mean, I wouldn't say not even come close to what his peak could be. And I think maybe you're talking about just this year's team. Obviously, what he did last year was spectacular. But I understand the sentiment of, like, again, that consistency has been a little up and down this year. So him trending in the direction of, like, consistently playing and at a high level from a decision-making perspective, that I think is how he can be better. And I agree that, with the sentiment of, like, the fact that he hasn't even necessarily done that yet, and the Knicks are playing the way they are and have a 31-16 record and obviously just smoked Memphis, it's really, really encouraging. And yeah, I mean, I am encouraged. Still Gucci says, Shwin, what's your assessment of Deuce this year? Also backup point guard next year. Do you think Kola can take that step to replace Cam? Last, what's a fair return for Mitch at deadline in your opinion? As far as Deuce had a weird year. He had a leg injury right earlier in the season, and then he had a hamstring thing, and he's come back, but he's not been great, and the finishing at the rim has not been that wonderful, and his shooting has come and gone, and you would like to see him have a little bit more juice as far as an on ball, as far as what he can do on ball. He's shooting 41.8% from the field, 36.8% from three. Again, you would love for that to get back to where it was last year when he was a 41% shooter from three. He's also down from two this year. So he's at 48.8% from two. Last year he's at 51.1. His efficiency has definitely dipped. He was at 59 true shooting last year, 54.9 this season. His effective field goal percentage has dropped off from 57.2 to 52.6. So you're hoping that improves and comes along. But he's still good. Like he's still giving you value. He's still a strong on-court positive. He's got a plus 10.6 on-court rating, plus 5.4 net. he is a good point of attack defender. And yes, there are matchups that are going to be problematic for him, but he's not. He can slot into different roles, and look, he's definitely not had as good a season offensively as he did last year. But I also think it's understandable given some of the injury stuff that he's been dealing with. It would not surprise me at all if he can get hot and close the season strong. So, yeah, I mean, I'm not too worried about Deuce. Backup, like, do I think Kolek can take the backup point guard role? Sure. Like, it's definitely possible, and maybe even probable. Like, I don't know if they're going to bring back Campaign, right? They obviously like Kolek a lot in terms, they gave him one of the richest contracts. I think it was the richest contract for a second round pick ever. They clearly like him, but it's such a hard thing because he's an older rookie. Obviously, we know that. So there's an argument to be made of like, well, if he's not playing now, how much do they definitely really like him, and what do they project for him, and how good is he? And I get that, but like, Campaign's played pretty well, and they're not gonna, we know that in a contention year, especially with Tibbs as the coach, it's not unreasonable for him to prefer the veteran over putting a rookie point guard into the mix. And, look, obviously Campaign's not some phenomenal defender, but he's a better defender than Tyler Kolek. And that matters. So, can he replace Campaign? Yeah, I think he can. Will he? Is that what their plan is? Is that the kind of long-term planning here? I think so, but I don't know. Like, if Campaign's obviously, he's had a pretty nice season. If he plays, let's say he maintains his level through the end of the year, I don't anticipate him having some rich market because of that. And for that reason, then shouldn't the Knicks just bring him back if they don't need to go to a high number for him? I don't know. Interesting to think about. And what's our fair return for Mitch at deadline, in your opinion? Oh, man. I wish I could tell you. I wish I could tell you, because Mitch is obviously very good when he plays. Hasn't played a second this season. We don't know where he's at with his recovery. He's doing some on-court work, but he hasn't done sprinting, I believe, he's not running, which is what Tibbs has said. He's obviously then not playing 3-on-3 or 4-on-4 or 5-on-5 stuff. He's not practicing with the team. So just doing individual work. I don't know. What is his value then? Like, if teams are not even sure that when is he going to be back, will he be back this year? Then he's an expiring contract after the season. I don't know what his value is. I don't know what a fair return for Mitch would be, because he hasn't played, and his value around the league is probably pretty much as low as he could get right now. I don't know if he's viewed as a negative contract, but he's certainly not going to be viewed as a positive one until he plays. And so far, we don't have an indication that he's going to be playing anytime soon. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what a fair return for Mitch is, to be honest. It makes it very tricky. JK, it's not just the Heat. A hallmark of bad front offices in this new era is not managing player relations in terms of contracts. That's a really good point. Kings with Fox, Jimmy Heat, Clay Warriors, Kuminga Warriors. Yeah, the Warriors have been a disaster with this stuff. Just really, really bad. We saw what happened with Clay. He was miserable there his last season, and that just did not end well for him or them. And then Kuminga, yeah, I don't even understand what they've done with Kuminga, because I would have never drafted him given the options they had at the board. Whatever, they take him. That's its own separate conversation. They've been messaging this entire time, like, we believe in his talent and blah, 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 but they've never really committed to him, right? Steve Kerr's never just been like, all right, you're starting. They've never even kind of forced Kerr's hand, right? At times, we've seen Leon maybe make moves to force Tibbs' hand in certain ways. And to Tibbs' credit himself, like there are times where he was like, all right, Evan Fournier, you're done. Quentin Grimes is starting, right? So like Tibbs deserves credit for that too, but they've never done that. They've never just been like, all right, you're starting. We're committing to this. And now and then they also have resisted putting him in trades at times for piece like a star that could come back potentially. And now he's hurt through the trade deadline, and they're going to have to figure out what they want to do with him after the season as far as do they want to pay him, right? Because he's entering restricted free agency. Do we want to pay him? Do we let him test the market? What number would we go to? He apparently wants some type of close to near max type deal. I wouldn't give that to him, but this is the risk you take when you allow a player to get this close to the end of their deal. And then, obviously for a young guy entering restricted free agency, we'll see. It's not a great situation. But yeah, I this is a really good point. Just in general, there are a lot of these situations around the league, and you have to figure out how to handle them. And we'll see what Minnesota does with Randall, because that'll be tricky in and of itself. BX Boy 71 asks, Okiki or TJ Warren, what's your preference? I've always been a TJ Warren guy. I love TJ Warren. I just like his game. I think they could use his potential scoring pop off the bench. Obviously, TJ Warren is older now. He's injury prone or whatever, but the guy's a shot maker. And as nice as it's been to see the bench give us some positive minutes here lately, I still think having a guy with his type of scoring chops coming off the bench, or at least be an option off the bench, would be nice. So like, yeah, I'll always just be like, and I like Chuma when he was coming out as a prospect. I was like kind of excited when the Knicks signed him in the offseason to that Exhibit 9 or 10 or whatever the fuck deal was. But I have a soft spot for TJ Warren. I think if he is right physically, and he's played throughout the year in the G League for the Knicks. If he's right physically, he is like what, a 6'8" taller wing who can score, and there's value to that potentially. At least as just as a depth piece. I'm not saying like we signed TJ Warren and now the chip is ours and nothing else needs to be done. No, but I think as a depth piece, having a guy that just has a lot of NBA experience, has played some playoff ball, and has experience playing with guys on this team, right? He's played with Mikal Bridges. He's played with Campaign. He's played with Landry Shamet in Phoenix, I believe. So, like, or maybe it was in Brooklyn that he played with Landry Shamet. Either way, the point is he has experience playing with some of these guys. So that just makes me feel like it's a good option to kind of have in your back pocket as a breaking case of emergency type of option. Alex asks, what moves do you see being made at the deadline? I'm assuming this is just about the Knicks here. My assumption, honestly, I'm not expecting a whole lot. And this goes back to the question about, what is Mitch's value? Mitch is like their best trade piece, and I don't mean that in terms of what his value is right now, which is very, very difficult to ascertain. But as far as he's their best piece from a salary standpoint, right? He's making $14.3 million this year. So that number gives you access potentially to players that can give you something. But the Knicks, they're close to the second apron. So if they aggregate salaries, they have to make sure that they bring in less than they're sending out. Because if they don't, then they'd be hard capped at the first apron, which they can't be, given all their situations. So they have that to consider. And then if you trade 2 for 1, then you need to sign TJ Warren at some point, or Chuma Okeke or whatever, to have enough players on the roster. You have to have 14 guys, and that will push you up again close to the second apron. So there's a lot of moving pieces to this on top of, like, if you start aggregating, like, who are you going for? So let's say Mitch and Precious together. Precious is playing well right now, right? So that's another thing to consider. He's playing well. He's giving you some decent minutes at the 5, backing up Cat. But he's also giving you good minutes next to Cat, which means that it gives you a little bit more versatility and flexibility with lineups. And it allows you to match up with teams in different ways, right? Like if you play Cleveland and it's like, hey, we need to play a little big here. Okay, well now you can play Precious with Cat, and obviously, Allen and Mobley is its own thing, but at least it gives you that option to match up size with size. But if you aggregate both them, then who are you getting back? Are you trying to get a wing? If you're getting a wing, then we're cool with Jericho Sims as the backup center. I'm not. And Tibbs, I think they probably like Huckporty, but that's more of a long-term thing, not what he is right now. Fair, however you feel about it. I don't, and I wouldn't like. I would feel not great about, hey, we're in a contention window and our backup 5 is Jericho Sims. Like that's, I don't know. Especially like, God forbid if Cat went down, that would be pretty brutal, right? Oh, we're gonna have Jericho Sims, Ariel Huckporty at the 5. Like that's the plan here. I don't know. We don't want to do that. And then then if you're looking at what is Mitch by himself, I don't know. I don't think you're gonna get much for him straight up. Now, if you attach second round picks, what could you get, right? I think Michael Scotto had it yesterday that the Knicks had talked to the Raptors about Chris Boucher, or at least had shown interest in Chris Boucher. I think you're looking at like Mitch in a second or 2 seconds or something for a guy like Chris Boucher. That's really where I think Mitch's value is right now. Mitch is obviously better than Chris Boucher, but he has to be on the court. If he's not on the court, it doesn't matter that we know he's better than Chris Boucher. And we know that, like, that's what makes this Mitch thing so difficult to figure out what they should do. And we don't know his medical situation, right? We don't know how far or what status, what's his status physically. So it's all a guessing game. But yeah, like, I don't know. Does that interest you? Mitch in a second or 2 seconds for Chris Boucher? That's kind of where I think his value is. And so ultimately, what moves do I see being made at the deadline? Mitch in a second or 2 seconds or something like that is kind of the only thing I see potentially happening. And even that, I'm not totally sold on happening, because I do think there's an argument of like, hey, does it make sense to trade Mitch at his lowest value for, think about what we're talking about here. Mitch for Chris Boucher. Do you think Chris Boucher moves the needle in the playoffs in any meaningful way, or has the potential to? I don't. What about Mitch for like Jonas Valanciunas? Again, same deal. Like, there are things I like about Jonas, and I can see the value of having him in the regular season. But like in the postseason, he can't play. And he's never going to be a good player in the postseason, especially at this point of his career. So is that worth it? Is like him being able to give you some solidity in the regular season, is that really worth it? I don't think so. And isn't the more, to me, if you view the Knicks as a contender, which I think most of us do, and the Knicks front office certainly does, you want to take swings and have the highest potential upside you can have. Trading Mitch for the caliber of player we're talking about doesn't do that. I understand that Mitch, there's a risk that he, even if he gets back on the court, that he gets, re-injured or whatever. But we also know that if Mitch can stay healthy and can get into rhythm, this is a player who can swing playoff series for you, right? We've seen him do it. So I would bet on that. And I would rather hold on to him now. I'd rather take that chance. And if he does come back and he does play well, guess what? In the offseason, if you're still, because I don't think the Knicks would be comfortable giving him an extension, well, he probably then will have more value as a trade asset. And even if he doesn't come back, or if he comes back and he gets re-injured, well, at least he's just an expiring then next year, right? Like that's easier money to move at that point. And is viewed differently than it will be right now. So that's, I guess I didn't really answer this question, but I guess if I were to put the odds on anything, if I had to bet one single outcome, I would bet the Knicks don't actually make a move. I think their move will be to sign TJ Warren. That's just what I think. JK asked, do you have a way too early playoff picture? Top 6 seeds in the East and West, any risers and fallers? I don't know. I can maybe look at the standings here. Might be a good idea. So in the East right now, I think the Cavs, I don't know how they're going to drop out of the 1 seed, even though they lost 3 in a row, right? But like, I'm not that worried about that, or I wouldn't be worried about that if I was a Cavs fan. They're 37-9. They're 5.5 games up on the Celtics. 6 in the loss column. They're 6.5 games up on the Knicks. 6.5 or 7 in the loss column. Like, it's just going to be. I don't see how anybody catches them. I'd be really shocked. So they're not going anywhere. Celtics, Knicks. I don't know. Celtics are playing some really fucking weird ball right now, but I'm not that worried about them in the playoffs. Although I'm getting a little bit more concerned. If I'm not that I care. I mean, I'm happy for them to struggle. But if I were a Celtics fan, I'd be getting a little bit more concerned from some of the stuff I've been seeing, especially with Jaylen Brown, who I think has had a really bad season. I could see the Bucks falling off, to be honest. I know they've had a strong run recently, but they just lost to the Blazers. They had a bad loss to the Clippers. I know the Clippers have been pretty good, but they just, I don't trust them. I think Indiana's going to pass them. Indiana's been in a really good run lately. They're 8-2 in their last 10. Feels like they found something. Their defense has been a lot better, surprisingly, over the last month and a half or so. They're actually Indiana is their 20th in defensive rating, but they've climbed significantly since the start of the season. Offensively, they have not hit the heights they had last year. They have the 9th best offense league, 115.5 offensive rating. So they're not bad offense, obviously, but last year they were their offense was a borderline historic one. So, but yeah, I think they're going to pass the Bucks. I think they'll get the 4 seed. I think they'll have home court in the first round. Miami, I have no idea. This East after that. So after the Pacers are 25-20. After that, you have Miami 23-22, Orlando 24-24, Detroit 23-23. Hawks, keep an eye on them. They're 22-25. I think they might. I think they're going to fall out entirely. I really do. Their only saving grace here might be that the Bulls, all the reports indicate they want to move off of guys like Levine and Vooch and whatever, right? There was a report the other day that they'd trade anybody in the roster other than Matas Buzelis, their first-round pick from this past season, because they owe a top 10 protected pick. So it behooves them to not be in the playoffs to improve their chances of keeping that pick. And so just on the virtue of Chicago's motivation to do that, and the fact the Hawks don't have motivation to tank at all because they owe an unprotected pick this year to the Spurs. So that might keep the Hawks in that play-in picture, but I think they're going to end up as the 10. Jalen Johnson being out for the year is a pretty big loss for them. Philly seems to have at least found a little bit of form here lately. They've won 3 in a row. We'll see how real that is, and if Paul George can get on the floor and not look washed, and if Embiid will ever get on the floor again this season, we'll see. But yeah, I think Philly will climb into that play-in spot, but I think Chicago drops out. So I guess Chicago drops out. I think Hawks finishes the 10. I don't think Philly will end up. I don't think they'll be able to catch up to Detroit or Orlando or Miami. And I'll just say I think I'll go with the Pistons getting the 6. I don't know. I like how they play. I think they play really hard. I think Cade's having a really strong season. Although all the talk about him being better than he should have started or whatever, give me a break. No. But I like that. And what I think is interesting is they actually have the flexibility to add at the deadline because they have cap space. So they have that ability. So they can make imbalanced trades. They can just do a lot of interesting things. And I think they're going to. I think they want to make the playoffs. I don't think they care that their pick might convey. I don't think that's a concern or a consideration for them at all. This is a franchise that has been a disaster for such a long time, and competence, relevancy are important for them. It's, they have to get people back into supporting the team, supporting them in a way that involves buying tickets, attending games and shit like that. I think they're going to go for it. So not go for it as far as trying to win a title, but I do think they're going to be looking to add at the deadline. I think they'll have some options to be able to do it. So, yeah, sure. I'll say Pistons 6, Orlando 7, Magic, or sorry, Orlando 7, Miami 8. That's I think those three teams can finish anywhere, but one of those three teams 100% will be the 6. And that, can the Knicks pass Boston? We'll see. Obviously, not breaking news there, I guess, but like they definitely can. And the way Boston's kind of like floating through this regular season, it almost feels like a chore for them. And at times, it has felt like the Knicks have approached the regular season that way too, right? So worth mentioning, but I don't know how else to put it other than this. There's more joy in how the Knicks are playing right now than anything I felt watching Boston over the last month and a half, where it just feels like they don't even really want to be out there. As like they're ready to, they want to fast forward. They want it to be April. They're just going through the motions a little bit. And then they've had these weird end of game sequences that they've lost. So yeah, that's what I'll say for the East. For the West, Thunder 1 seed. Again, they're 37-8. Nobody's passing them. Rockets are 32-14. They're in the 2 spot right now. I don't know who's going to catch them. I mean, I think they're better than Memphis. I think they're better than Denver. Denver's 4 games back in the loss column. I know Denver's been on a run too, but like the Rockets are 8-2 in the last 10. Denver's 7-3. So they've actually lost a game as they've played better. And they just have depth. Like the Rockets no one injury totally sinks them. And that's really kind of important when you're looking at when you're thinking about where teams are going to finish. I like Memphis at 3. I think they'll stay there. Honestly, I kind of buy most of this West End the same. Keep an eye on the Lakers. If AD's out for an extended period of time, I think they'll drop off. And in general, they're vastly outperforming their like point differential and all kinds of metrics. They could have. It would not surprise me if all of a sudden at some point we're looking up and they're like they've lost 5 in a row, 6 in a row, or something. And people are like, what's wrong with the Lakers? It's probably this is what they are. I think I'm just going to pull it up here. So they're 26-19 based on their point differential. They have like their Pythagorean win-loss is 21 and 24. So they're vastly outperforming their point differential. Sometimes, look, if you have great players, you can do that because they can kind of swing those tight games in their favor. But I think they'll fall out or fall off. The Clippers, I love their over to come in to before the season. I still obviously it's trending the right way. They're 26-20. They have the second best defense in the league by defensive rating. They're basically playing to their numbers, right? 27-19 Pythagorean win-loss. They're 26-20, so they've actually gotten unlucky slightly. But yeah, like I think they're going to finish top 6. Honestly, they have a chance if Kawhi can stay healthy, which we know is the biggest if ever. They have a chance to get that 4 seed. Like they could catch Denver potentially. So I like them. I think they'll finish 5 at minimum. I think they'll pass the Lakers. I think they're better than the Lakers. And I think Ty Lue's he's coaching a hell of a season. Minnesota's 25-21. We all know that they've had weird stuff going on with them. The vibes haven't been great, whatever. It's worth mentioning. They do have the 5th best defense in the league. They're 11th in net rating. They're slightly underperforming their point differential. I think they're better than it feels, and it feels the way it does because of the season they had last year, and then they make the cat trade and things move around and whatever. But I would suspect that they finish in the 6th spot. I like them more than Phoenix. Dallas is tough to gauge because they're dealing with so many injuries. Derek Lively is out for an extended period of time. Luka's still out right now, although there's reports that they think he'll be back before the All-Star break. So I'll have to see with that. But yeah, so I guess I'll say Thunder, Rockets, Grizzlies, Nuggets still get the 4, Clips at 5, Wolves at 6, and then I think Lakers 7, Mavericks 8, Suns 9, Kings 10. Kings are weird though. We don't know. We don't know what it could be. Because if they trade De'Aaron Fox, then obviously this changes. If they trade De'Aaron Fox, then it might signal that they're going to start moving other guys too, right? And maybe that means that they're going to go into more of a fire sale mode and fall off. And then at that point, you're probably looking at the Warriors at the 10. Although can't dismiss the Spurs, who are 20 and 23. But they're tied in the loss column with the Warriors, but they're 3 games back in the win column. So we'll see what happens there. But I think the Warriors, if the Kings sell off, I would say the Warriors. If not, I think the Kings stay in the 10, and maybe even get up to 9 or 8 or something. Sorry. Trying to get to as many as I can get to. BX Boy, Houston's a little like us 2 years ago. Nice team, well coached, tough to play, but limited playoff ceiling because of offense. I think a Fox trade would be a good idea for them. I don't think they should go for De'Aaron Fox. I don't think they need to go for De'Aaron Fox. Like, they should just hang out. I think they should hang out. I like their team. I think Amen is really, really coming along, but you still don't quite know what he is as far as an offensive centerpiece, right? Does he have that in him? Is that what he is? Potentially. But like, we don't know until there's just no reason to rush it. Like, they can be on a fact-finding mission for the year, right? Okay, hey, let's see what this group looks like by the end of the season. Because Amen's just in his second year, right? Jalen Green, they already extended. So let's see what he looks like. He's, I don't know. The on-off stuff with him is what it is. Let's see where Şengün is, right? Let's see where Whitmore is. Let's see where Tari Eason is. Let's see where these guys all are at the end of the season. Let's see what we look like as a group at the end of the season. And then let's go into the offseason with all of our assets, all these young pieces that we can now move. More players might become available because right now the only main player or big player that looks like he's going to become available is De'Aaron Fox or Jimmy Butler. And I would not be in the Jimmy Butler business if I were them. I like Fox. I don't think Fox is a number one guy on a contender. I think he's actually more of like a third best guy or maybe a second best guy, depending on who your number one guy is. And I'm not sure, as good as like Amen is and all these various guys are, as fun as this team can be and as well coached and tough and deep as they are, do you feel like strongly that any of these guys is 100% franchise player? And I mean, as far as being like the best guy in a title team, I don't. So I would wait. I would not go for Fox for them. I wouldn't hate going for Cam Johnson for them though, because I think they could use the shooting. Fountain of Hoop. Would Grimes have helped this current team? And if you could bet, do you think a move gets made by the deadline? Again, if I could bet, I don't think a move gets made at the deadline. Would Grimes help this current team? Yeah, he would definitely help this current team. He definitely would. But he was, we just talked about getting ahead of things. I think the Knicks felt, and we all felt it, we saw it, we heard it, right? Grimes just being unhappy with his role, with how he perceived, how he was being used and all this type of stuff. He was just unhappy in New York last year. And I thought his defense dropped off last season as a result of being unhappy and maybe not trying as hard as he was and whatever. In his offense, he really struggled at times last year. But yeah, I mean, he'd definitely help. We could definitely use another wing. But one thing I will say is with Quentin Grimes, and good for him to kind of have a nice little bounce back. He's not doing anything that is that different from what we saw in him his second year, right? He's averaging 10, he's playing 23.1 minutes per game this year. He's shooting 46.2 from the field, 40.2 from three. He's averaging 10.3 points, 4 rebounds, 2.2 assists. In New York, his second year when he started 66 games, he averaged just under 30 minutes per game. He averaged 11.3 points, 3.2 rebounds, 2.1 assists. He shot 46.8 from the field, 38.6 from three. He actually had a higher effective field goal percentage and a higher true shooting percentage in New York that year. He's not it's not like he's taken some massive leap. So while I definitely think he would help us right now, and he'd give us a little, I mean, replace Landry Shamet with Quentin Grimes would be a good trade off. As much as that's the case, I still, I personally am not too. I think it's, I get it, and I'm not saying you're doing this, but I'm not too worried about Quentin Grimes or what could have been or anything. He's a good player, but to me, he still remains limited in the ways that we all, or most of us at least, felt he was limited as far as on-ball creation, what he can do off the bounce, all that type of stuff. Even like shooting off the dribble, right? Those type of things. I'm just not that. Yeah, it's what it is. He's a nice player, but I don't regret too much him not being here. And look, it's a lot easier to feel that way when Mikal is playing the way he is, and OG is playing the way he is, and Josh Hart's playing the way he is. But yeah. I mean, as far as like broad stuff, the only I would trade De'Aaron Fox for sure if I was Sacramento before this deadline. I think this is his peak value. And if I'm San Antonio, there's definitely packages I would put together that I would feel fine about giving up to get De'Aaron Fox, because while I was asked about should Houston do it, the concerns I have about Houston, I don't have about San Antonio because of Wemby, right? Like I feel pretty confident at some point Wemby is going to be able to be the best player on a championship team. And so because of that, I think De'Aaron Fox would be a lot more kind of attractive as an option to me if I were the Spurs than I would be if I were the Rockets. All right. I think that about does it for today. Thank you for everybody that tuned in. Thanks for listening. Appreciate your time. The Knicks play the Nuggets tonight. Tyrese and Sam will be on the rundown, so give that a listen. Other than that, me and Prez will be recording probably tomorrow, so hopefully that'll be out by Friday. And yeah, all right, that is our pod for today. Thank you to our sponsor, BetOnline. Thanks to everybody in the comments again, and I'll see you on Friday. Peace.